Amendment 184ZBA. Baroness Nicholson of Winterbourne.
My Lords, I thank you for waiting for this very late debate, and I can assure you that the intensity of feeling about this is not reflected by the numbers in the chamber tonight. Indeed, we had a debate on this some couple of weeks ago, and I might perhaps point out that the debate today still demands the withdrawal of Annex B, which gives a priority to trans people over women. But despite the word trans people, we believe that this is a debate about the rights of women to have their dignity, privacy and safety reaffirmed and brought back into the centre, because those three things have disappeared. There's a rising tide of misogyny in society today because of social media, and the NHS should be behind us in terms of supporting women because of our priority needs in health. Indeed, I would suggest that trans rights, instead of being priority over women, which has happened because of Annex B, trans rights should be reconciled with, but cannot trump, the dignity and safety of all patients. No one patient, save for medical reasons, should be prioritised over anyone else. I think that is one of the most fundamental failings of the 2019 Annex B, which talks quite differently to that. Because 51% of the population are being deprived, and the protections that we have taken at least 50 years to come through at all. Indeed, I would suggest that the rights of women is our priori, an absolute touchstone for any civilised society, and we've got it wrong. We've somehow changed course. I suggest that Parliament sets the law. We create the common position for society on any aspect at all of life. Indeed, we are omnipotent and omnicompetent, or rather, not necessarily this chamber, but the other chamber is omnipotent and omnicompetent. And yet, this self-ID, which is the heart of Annex B, has deliberately been pushed through almost surreptitiously without debate in either chamber. I think this is scandalous, and I'm a parliamentarian of many years standing in different parliaments, and for me the heart of this debate is that Parliament has been ignored and bypassed, and surreptitiously something really far-reaching has been brought in, which affects all families, all faiths, all identities, and all levels of society. In place of sex-based rights, we are given priority rights to one special section of society. I have every respect for that section of society. Indeed, as a Member of Parliament, I must have been one of the very earliest Members of Parliament who actually tackled transgenderism in my constituency. One of the most delightful people came to see me in a terrible state. I knew the parents well, ancient parents, and I knew the families, I knew the village, I knew the farms. And this person came in because she was in a dreadful state. She had become fully altered, both physically and through drugs. And the result of that was, because she'd been away doing that some time, it had taken at least a year, she went abroad. When she came back, her job had disappeared. When she reapplied, she was placed at a much lower level. That meant less status, less salary, less holidays, and more misery, as it were, because she felt thoroughly demeaned by this. She was, in fact, a member of the police, and it wasn't very easy at that moment to persuade the police that this was a fully acceptable thing to have done. So I think in that sense I've won my colours on transgenderism. It wasn't easy, but I managed it. And it wasn't easy socially for her, and I really helped on that as well. Nonetheless, where we are today is in a different situation, whereby my gender, my sex, has been made less dignified in hospital, and by a backdoor attempt. Our amendment tonight seeks to reverse this and to include the very deliberate opt-out in the 2010 Equality Act to protect single-sex spaces in hospitals. These are paragraphs 26 and 28. And I would suggest to the noble Lord the Ministers that the filleting of the relevant clause which has been placed in Annex B to justify this elite position of one small branch of society, I haven't seen that filleting of legislation anywhere before in Britain. I have seen it in new democracies. And it's a terrible thing to do because you are cheating the public. You're saying this is in fact the law when it is not the law. You have filleted it, and that is what has happened with Annex B. I'm really shocked by that as a parliamentarian. Irrespective of the subject, that is fact. It's a very wrong thing to have done. And I'm not at all happy that the current review fulfills best practice either. Having raised this for 2 or 3 years with ministers and received very little response, I have been informed twice now that there is a review. Indeed, I think there are 2 reviews going on, if not 3. However, the one that I believe the Minister is in charge of, to which the Minister, the noble Lord the Minister, referred, this one, I would suggest, is again in breach of government's own regulations on how a review is conducted. And those regulations, which are quite old, are rather good. They're very clear, they're very simple. They say you mustn't have people running this who are, in fact, have skin in the game. Yet that is exactly what has happened. In the Daily Telegraph today, a whole batch of rather wonderful women who don't sit in this house, alas, but run various women's organisations and are medical, have declared correctly that they have not been invited to give evidence. In other words, this review has been done without the input from the very people who will know more about it. I offered to give evidence myself, but I was not wanted. That's a different matter. I'm not medical. That may be perfectly fair. But these women, they're very special indeed, and they have not been consulted. This means women, generally speaking, have been left out of the review. And worse than that, even that, is that the people running the review, who I know, fantastic people, chief of nurses and so on, and the LGBTQ advisor, wonderful, very interesting, hugely knowledgeable people, but they have more than skin in the game. They are the game. And I do believe it's not right, therefore, that the review that matters so much to 51% of the population and to their families should be conducted in this way. So I'm rather unhappy about this too, and it's being rushed through in parallel with this bill, and I suggest it doesn't meet the government's own guidelines on consultations on reviews. No impartiality and tremendous interest of the review team. Well, that's all too easy, but it doesn't actually give the right result. I remember again as a Member of Parliament a massive review conducted by the European Union into farming. My constituency was farming, and they came to see me because they were worried about what might come out of it. So I found from our own files here in London who was on the consultation. And, of course, there wasn't a single farmer. And this is rather the same thing, I would suggest. Of course, a number of colleagues in this House take their briefings from a lobby group called Stonewall. Stonewall has declared in its briefing for their responses to this debate that they should comment, that any comments from myself and others, Lord Blencathra, for example, the noble Lord Blencathra, should be responded to by saying blah, blah, blah. I would suggest that this is infinitely too serious for such a response. I finally wish to draw to the House's attention. I have been requested on a number of occasions by the noble Lord the Minister and others to give examples of what it is I am talking about. This is not at all easy because all the examples I've been given in confidence. And whereas I know who they are, Some of them are medical professionals. Some of them have already had their jobs threatened. I can see why they don't want to be known. However, a rather wonderful lady, I can't say who she is, she was raped about a year ago in a hospital by a man. There's only one way of having rape in Britain, and that is male on woman. You can't rape if you don't have the structure of a male. She was raped. She naturally reported it to the police. The police spoke to the hospital, and the hospital informed the police that there was no male in the hospital, therefore the rape couldn't have happened. They forgot there was television, nurses, and observers, as it were. Nonetheless, it's taken nearly a year for the hospital to agree that actually there was a male in the ward, and yes, this rape happened. During that year, my friend, by email, and it's all recorded, I know where the case is, I know who the police are, I know which the hospital is, I know everything on it, because she's given me the full case to make sure I knew what she was saying and that it was true. During that year, she's almost come to the edge of a nervous breakdown because being disbelieved at being raped in hospital has been such an appalling shock. Now, the hospital, with all the CCTV, actually have had to admit that the rape happened, that it was by a man, and therefore the police have changed their tune and have become enormously supportive and helpful, and the case is going ahead. But this has arisen directly from Annex B. The result of Annex B is that hospital trusts have informed ward sisters and nurses that if there is a male as a trans person in a female ward and a female patient or anyone complains, they must be told that that is not true. There is no male there. I refer there to the duty of candour in the National Health Service and have to say, frankly, I think it's completely wrong the National Health Service should be instructing staff or allowing a misleading of patients, in other words, telling a straightforward lie. This is not acceptable. The National Health Service is admired globally, and the duty of candour makes it absolutely imperative that the National Health Service should be frank and open and honest with the patients. Yet, trust after trust after trust has informed its staff that they must say the opposite to the truth when this situation arises. And the impact on my new friend is absolutely appalling. I beg leave to move.
Amendment proposed. Insert the following